Greetings Warhammer enthusiast. Before you stands a voice assistant of the podcast, dedicated to spreading the greater good. If you find this information useful, please do not hesitate to leave a like and subscribe. Together, we shall explore the depths of the Warhammer universe and share in its wonders. In the grim aftermath of the Horus heresy, the Imperium of Man embarked on an immense crusade of retribution and purification. This monumental task, known as the Great Scouring, sought to cleanse the galaxy of traitors who had sided with the corruptive powers of chaos. Cast out, the traitors were driven into the swirling, malevolent warp storm known as the Eye of Terror. The Eye, a haven for the damned and the disloyal, became a cauldron of perpetual conflict. Within this otherworldly expanse, the followers of chaos squabbled and warred for control and territory. Their once unified forces fractured, descending into a tumultuous state of infighting. Yet, despite the unending strife within the Eye, the threat the exiles posed to the Imperium was far from neutralized. Even as they fought amongst themselves, these traitors kept their hateful gaze fixed on the realm of man. They sought to topple the Imperium, launching sporadic raids and invasions in their quest for vengeance and power. On the rare occasion, a chaos champion of exceptional might and ambition would rise from the tumult, capable of uniting the disparate warlords and their armies. When such an individual ascends, old grudges are grudgingly set aside, and unstable alliances formed, paving the path for a terrible event known as a Black Crusade. A Black Crusade represents the terrifying unity of the myriad servants of chaos. Assembled under the banner of a single champion, this force is as diverse as it is deadly. From the teeming, desperate masses of the lost and the damned, to the towering and monstrous chaos titans, every facet of the Dark God's domain is represented. The dread sorcery of the Dark Mechanicum takes form in bizarre and fearsome war machines, while the demonic entities of the Warp join the unholy crusade, adding their otherworldly power to the mix. Leading this horrific force into the realm of man are the vengeful warbands of the Chaos Space Marines, their armor tarnished and their souls irredeemably corrupted. The onset of a Black Crusade is a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. Entire worlds fall victim to the relentless onslaught of the Chaos Horde, their populations sacrificed in the names of the insidious Dark Gods. The gods themselves divert their attention to the material realm, delighting in the slaughter and devastation carried out in their honor. Yet, the nature of chaos is as unpredictable as it is malevolent. Unless repelled by the defenders of the Imperium, a Black Crusade inevitably disintegrates into disparate hosts and warbands, each pursuing their own selfish ambitions and dark desires. In the bloody aftermath of the monumental battle for Terra, Sigismund, the first captain of the Imperial Fists, found himself haunted by the specter of Ezekiel Abaddon, the nefarious captain of the Sons of Horus. Abaddon, infamous for his pivotal role in nearly annihilating the Imperium during the dreadful Horus heresy, became the obsession of Sigismund's enduring search for retribution. The relentless hunt for Abaddon stretched across centuries, a relentless pursuit that time and time again seemed doomed to failure. Finally, a breakthrough came when Sigismund discovered that Abaddon, along with a number of traitor Legion survivors, had sought refuge within the Eye of Terror, that swirling vortex of madness and chaos. However, when Sigismund presented his findings to the High Lords of Terror and the other Imperium leaders, his claims were met with skepticism. The notion that the traitors could have survived within the Eye of Terror for the many long centuries since the heresy was met with disbelief. Yet, Sigismund remained unshaken in his conviction. As the High Marshal of the Black Templars, he marshaled a sizable fleet from his chapter to safeguard the Cadian Gate, the ominous portal leading into the Eye of Terror. But the High Marshal was not content with merely mounting a defensive posture. A man of action, he dispatched ships into the very heart of the Eye to ferret out the traitors. One such vessel, a strike cruiser commanded by Marshal Averthus, was beset by demons shortly after crossing the threshold. The cruiser crash-landed on the Black Legion-held world of Malium. When the Black Legion forces entered the crashed cruiser, they found a ghost ship. Its crew had been slain, but the vessel still held a treasure trove of information. The Black Legion learned that centuries had passed in the realm beyond the Eye. More critical, however, was the revelation of Sigismund's formidable fleet maintaining vigil over the Eye. As the Black Legion continued to sift through the remnants of the cruiser, the sorcerer Iskondo Kion was drawn by a spectral voice. Following this eerie call, he ventured underground to the former resting place of Horus. There, to his surprise, he discovered the exiled Inquisitor Moriana, a new and unpredictable player in this cosmic game of war and retribution. Despite being ensnared by the formidable Black Legion, Moriana showed no sign of fear. Instead, she audaciously demanded an audience with Abaddon, promising she held insights into the state of the Imperium and his own fate. Although cautious, Kion conceded to her demand, allowing her to stand before the fearsome Lord of the Black Legion. Moriana did not falter in the face of Abaddon's imposing presence. She unveiled the history of the Imperium since his descent into the Eye of Terror, tracing the shifting tides of power and the scars of battle. More ominously, she warned Abaddon of the threat posed by the sorcerer Lord Thagus Daravek, Abaddon's primary adversary in the ongoing Legion Wars. According to Moriana, Daravek sought the coveted title of War Master of Chaos, a position Abaddon himself aspired to. She cautioned that if Daravek remained unchecked, he would inevitably gain the favor of the capricious Chaos gods, eliminate Abaddon, and then set about wreaking havoc upon the Imperium himself. Intrigued, Abaddon queried how Daravek might secure the title of War Master. Moriana revealed that both Daravek and Abaddon were tormented by the same haunting vision of the demon sword Dracnion. The sword, she claimed, resided outside the Eye of Terror. Whoever managed to claim this formidable weapon first would secure their ascension as the new War Master of Chaos, and shatter the foundations of the Imperium. This revelation stirred Abaddon, for he had shared his visions with no one, and he now had a name for the spectral sword that had been plaguing his dreams for some time. With a newfound purpose, he devoted himself to securing possession of Dracnion. Even though Daravek was still a significant threat, Abaddon could not afford the risk of his rival acquiring the sword first. As a result, he rallied the majority of the Black Legion's fleet, preparing to embark from the Eye of Terror. Despite knowing that Sigismund's Black Templars' fleet lay in wait for his forces outside the Eye, Abaddon was unyielding. He made a solemn vow to obliterate anyone who dared to obstruct his path to his destiny. With the Warp Ghost's Warban's assistance, the Black Legion emerged from the Eye, rapidly coming face to face with Sigismund and his Black Templars' fleet. Their forces clashed within the tumultuous arena of the Cadian Gate. Entrusting command of the flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, to Sorcerer Kion, Abaddon led a personal boarding assault on Sigismund's flagship, the Eternal Crusader. Numerous Black Legion warriors sought the glory of slaying High Marshal Sigismund, but none were a match for his martial prowess and the valiant sword brethren fighting at his side. A dozen warriors fell before Sigismund's onslaught before Abaddon finally reached him. However, Abaddon did not immediately draw his weapons. He respected Sigismund and attempted to persuade the High Marshal to join their cause, to reclaim the Imperium that he believed was rightfully theirs. However, Sigismund vehemently refused, denouncing Abaddon and the Black Legion as oathbreakers who had nearly decimated the Imperium they claimed to cherish. Realizing that Sigismund was beyond persuasion, Abaddon, with a sense of regret, prepared for combat as their followers watched in anticipation. At this critical juncture, disaster struck the Black Legion. The sorcerer Lord Daravek's Legion host emerged from the Eye, having tracked down the Black Legion through unknown means. Daravek, aware of Abaddon's quest for the demon sword Dracnion, intended to slay the Black Legion's lord before he could ascend as the new War Master of Chaos. Caught between the Legion host and the Black Templars, Kion had to navigate the formidable task of saving the Black Legion's fleet from total annihilation. While the Black Legion's fleet battled for survival, the climactic duel between Abaddon and Sigismund reached its conclusion. The High Marshal lay dead, but not before he had driven his black sword deep into Abaddon's chest. Recognizing the deadly wound, the Black Legion members nearby rushed to aid their fallen lord and began to evacuate the Eternal Crusader. Kion's psychic signal alerted them to Daravek's onslaught and the imminent arrival of Fleet Master Valaka's ship, the Thane, to aid their evacuation. With Abaddon's escape secure, Kion ordered the Black Legion's fleet to force their way through the Black Templars' blockade and escape into the Warp. In a tactical gambit, Kion commanded the Vengeful Spirit to charge Daravek's Legion host, intending to lure the Sorcerer Lord into boarding the ship and buying the Black Legion's fleet some precious time to escape. Darovec took the bait and led a boarding assault on the vengeful spirit, causing severe casualties among its defenders. Nevertheless, Kian managed to slay Darovec before he could reach the command bridge. The Black Legion's fleet made good use of the reprieve, and despite considerable losses to the Black Templars, the majority managed to escape into the warp. Now only the vengeful spirit and a handful of Legion ships remained, but the tide soon turned in their favor. Confronted with the might of the Legion host, the Black Templars retreated into the warp, bringing word of the invasion to the Imperium. In the aftermath of Darovec's death, the unity of the Legion host shattered, and they fractured into several large factions. These groups ventured into the warp and promptly began assaulting nearby Imperium worlds, igniting the spark of a new era of conflict. Once the fierce battle concluded, Abaddon was swiftly returned to the safety of the vengeful spirit to recover from his grievous injury, his life teetering on the precipice due to the wound inflicted by Sigismund. Despite the pressing need to rally their scattered fleet, the Black Legion's war leaders were confronted with several immediate issues. Foremost among these was the question of how to handle the non-Ezekarian members of the Black Legion who had witnessed the duel between Abaddon and Sigismund. It was imperative that they prevent the narrative of their seemingly invincible leader's near demise at the hands of the High Marshal from spreading. The task of silencing these potential sources of dissent fell to Sorcerer Kian. Despite his efforts, Chaos Lord Zaidu Varolas managed to elude the purge, thanks to the intervention of the Ezekarian Telemakan Lyras, who was keen to protect his favored warrior. With this internal threat dealt with, the Black Legion formally announced its war on the Imperium. Their declaration took a macabre form. They commandeered the captured Black Templar's ship, the Valorous Vow, loaded it with extensive data pertaining to the First Battle of Cadia, and sent it to the High Lords of Terror. As a grim centerpiece, the ship bore the corpse of Sigismund, still clutching his black sword. In preparation for the ship's daunting journey to Terror, Abaddon instructed Sorcerer Kian to etch a terse yet potent message into Sigismund's black sword: "We are returned." Amidst the tumult of this Black Crusade, Abaddon led his forces to the world of Uralan and the ominous Tower of Silence. There, he would stake his claim on the demon sword Drachnaion, the object of his intense quest and the symbol of his intended ascension to the title of War Master of Chaos. The spectral blade, with its power and its profound significance to the struggle of Abaddon, was to play a pivotal role in the escalating war against the Imperium. During this period, the Imperium was still in the process of erecting its colossal defenses on Cadia and at the naval port of Bellis Corona. Nevertheless, the tidal wave of Abaddon's invasion swept across countless worlds in a resolute push to make the Emperor submit to the omnipotent forces of chaos. Planets in proximity to the Eye of Terror collapsed into pandemonium, as terrifying legions fell from the skies and demons tore their way into reality. For instance, on the fertile world of Valesia, Zagthene the Broken indulged his warband in a riotous frenzy of violence and destruction. This dread lord erected an enormous labyrinth of thorns from the planet's bloodrose orchards, blinded his captives, and set them loose within its winding passages for his twisted amusement, hunting them down at leisure. Similarly, Erelak and his raptors committed unspeakable atrocities on the hive cities of Melphia, including the macabre spectacle of hanging millions of its citizens from gigantic gallows. In comparison to the precisely targeted strikes that would characterize the later Black Crusades, this invasion was more akin to the wild, uncontrolled swings of a blunt sword. The tide of chaos seemed unstoppable, as world after world was reduced to ashes. The only fortress that remained unscathed was the bastion world of Cadia. On Earthward, the stoic forces of Cadia, assisted by the 4th and 5th companies of the Imperial Fists, held firm against the chaos onslaught led by the first wave of defilers. Following 4 days of intense battle, the forces of chaos were forced into a reluctant retreat. The Imperial forces, though devastated, managed to reclaim their lost territory. Countless worlds were left in ruins, yet the Black Legion had accomplished its goal of erasing the humiliation of their heresy defeat, and reinvigorating their dwindling morale. As the storm of chaos raged across the galaxy, the Imperium dispatched its warriors to stem the tide. The Imperial Guard, Adeptus Mechanicus, and Space Marines, freshly divided due to the Second Founding, stood united against Abaddon's onslaught. The extent to which the Crusade had penetrated the heart of the Imperium compelled the establishment of significant fortifications on Cadia and the construction of a massive naval port at Bellis Corona. These efforts were intended to prevent further incursions and to serve as a symbol of the Imperium's unyielding resolve. In a subsequent period of escalating conflict, the Second Black Crusade unfolded as a monumental assault on the newly fortified stronghold of Cadia. The attacking forces, just as potent in their numbers and power as before, unleashed a wave of savage brutality. However, the Imperium had had time to prepare for this impending onslaught. Following the fallout of the First Black Crusade, the Imperium had recognized the need to build robust defenses around the Cadian Gate, most notably on Cadia itself. A bulwark was raised on Nemesis Tessera, and an extensive naval port was established at Bellis Corona. These outposts were designed to form a formidable wall against which the forces of chaos would crash and eventually be repelled, serving to safeguard the heart of the Imperium against further attacks. The lessons from the First Black Crusade had indeed been well learnt by both sides. Abaddon the Despoiler, as relentless as ever, spearheaded this second invasion. Commanding an enormous armada and army, potentially even surpassing the scale of the previous invasion, Abaddon wasted no time in launching his attack. The Imperial shipyards at Bellis Corona were the first to fall, succumbing to a clever diversionary attack which obliterated dozens of Imperial Navy crews. Concurrently, Abaddon and his elite bringers of despair descended on the system's outermost moons. On these barren surfaces, Abaddon conducted a dark ritual that cursed one of the moons. This malevolent spell would eventually awaken and unleash a devastating, mutagenic plague upon the unsuspecting defenders. Meanwhile, the Black Legion launched a brutal assault on the inquisitorial fortress on Nemesis Tessera. This relentless assault resulted in the release of several captive demons. Abaddon himself teleported to the surface of Nemesis Tessera with a singular mission: to topple its hexagrammic, eldritch needles, enormous black stone pylons that kept the encroaching tides of the warp at bay. On Cadia, fierce fighting erupted around the fortress walls that stretched across the globe. The relentless siege stretched over 5 years, inflicting untold suffering and despair on the defenders. On the other side, the attackers were met with an impenetrable barrier that stoked their mounting frustration. In the midst of this chaos, a fleet of word-bearers arrived and began their assault on the Imperial fleet assets in the region. Despite not having any formal alliance with Abaddon, they boarded 5 Imperial cruisers, unleashing their defilers onto each. These monstrous machines tore through the vessels, leaving the word-bearers to pack them with explosives and send them hurtling back into the Imperial Armada. However, when the forces of chaos found themselves thwarted at Cadia, they began to disperse into the surrounding systems. These diversionary attacks were expertly thwarted by the various fortresses constructed for precisely this purpose, instilling a newfound hope in the hearts of mankind. With his invasion repelled, Abaddon was compelled to retreat once again to the Eye of Terror. There, he would bide his time, rebuilding his forces and plotting his next assault against the Imperium. In an era shrouded in conflict and dread, the Third Black Crusade was initiated. As part of a cunning ploy to divert the attention of the Imperium away from his desecration of the tomb of Saint Gerstal on the eponymous shrine world, Abaddon launched a strategic offensive against Cadia. This was a high-stakes gamble, involving the deployment of the fearsome demon prince, Talamin, the Prince of Princes himself. Abaddon, through guile or promise, managed to convince Talamin that the blood of the Adeptus Astartes held untold powers. This tantalizing proposition made the demon prince believe that such a potent elixir could not only magnify his already formidable strength but also grant him the power to vanquish his rivals within the Eye of Terror. The bait was set, and Talamin, lured by the prospect of unrivaled dominance, launched a brutal onslaught against the defenders of the Imperium. The battle that ensued was a horrifying spectacle. Talamin and his legions of demonic minions ravaged through the ranks of the Imperial soldiers, claiming the lives of millions. The devastation wreaked was immense, catching the attention of several loyalist Space Marine chapters. The lure was too potent, and no less than a dozen chapters were drawn to the maelstrom of battle. Meanwhile, Abaddon pursued his real objective undeterred. His forces destroyed the sacred remains of Saint Gerstal, effectively thwarting any chance of the prophecy associated with the saint coming to fruition. However, despite the fierce onslaught by Talamin and his forces, the indomitable warriors of the Space Wolves chapter finally managed to turn the tide of battle. They drove the demon prince back into the chaotic abyss of the warp, forcing a tactical retreat. By the time the Space Wolves had regained control, Abaddon had already accomplished his clandestine mission. The Third Black Crusade marked yet another insidious victory for the forces of chaos. The Fourth Black Crusade unfolded as an event of immense devastation for the Imperium. Spearheaded by Abaddon the Despoiler, the assault resulted in catastrophic losses, the most notable being the utter destruction of the Grand Citadel of Cromarch, and a tragic toll in lives. Abaddon had honed his strategies from the previous crusades, applying them with ruthless efficiency. While he besieged the fortifications of Cadia, the major portion of his forces spilled out into the wild expanses of the Segmentum Obscurus. However, the real theater of battle was elsewhere, on the world of Elfana, where the climax of the onslaught was to play out. Embodying the dark charisma and brutal might of the Chaos forces, Abaddon personally led the attack on Elfana. His presence alone was enough to turn the tides in the favor of the forces of Chaos. With his hordes of followers and warriors falling in droves around him, he marched forth towards the citadel of the Cromarch. The citadel was a grand edifice, a symbol of imperial might, but it was not to stand against the onslaught. With his demon sword, Dracnion, Abaddon shattered the citadel's gates. With the citadel breached, he moved inexorably into the heart of the fortress. Inside, he extinguished the ancient lineage of the Cromarch and obliterated the ancient monolith within, sowing ruin and despair. In the aftermath of the citadel's fall, Abaddon granted his horde free reign over the city. The atrocities that followed spared no one. Chaos reigned as the civilian populace was subjected to indescribable torment. However, Abaddon's disregard for swift consolidation of his victory became his downfall. The time bought by the horrors inflicted upon the city allowed imperial forces to regroup and plan their vengeance. With a renewed sense of purpose and righteous fury, they struck back, their counterattack washing over the Chaos forces like a tide. The once rampaging tide of chaos was purged from the planet, with only a handful escaping back to the Eye of Terror. Thus, the Fourth Black Crusade came to an end, marked by a Pyrrhic victory for the Imperium. The Fifth Black Crusade was a chapter of atrocities and destruction that echoed through the annals of imperial history. This terrifying onslaught led to the devastation of the Alizia sector, and culminated in the annihilation of the ancient imperial city of Cadia. It was here that the entirety of the city's populace was horrifically sacrificed in a ritual of chaos, rending the heavens apart and summoning a near-infinite number of entities from the warp. In orchestrating this campaign, Abaddon the Despoiler displayed his strategic prowess. The War Master meticulously orchestrated invasions on a multitude of worlds within the sector, delegating the task of razing cities, shrines, and temples to his trusted warlords. Simultaneously, he kept the Imperial Navy distracted with deep void skirmishes, using his fleet with tactical precision. Abaddon aimed to incite a sector-wide conflict potent enough to provoke a significant response from the Imperium, and draw in the Adeptus Astartes, the legendary Space Marines. With his plans in place, Abaddon led the main force of his Black Legion to Cadia, an illustrious city on the planet Tarinth. He reduced the city to ashes and enslaved its people. As the Space Marines of the Warhawks and Venerators chapters arrived in full strength on Tarinth, they launched an immediate assault on Cadia. However, their assault coincided with Abaddon's horrifying sacrifice of 10 million citizens, their lifeblood channeled into a vast lake through the city's grand canals. Above this crimson lake, the warp tore open, and Doombreed, the most formidable of all Khorne's demon princes, emerged, roaring in victory. Abaddon had enticed Doombreed with a sinister pact, promising the skulls of an entire chapter of Space Marines in exchange for its service. As thousands of bloodletters emerged from the Blood Lake, Doombreed plunged into the ranks of the Warhawks and Venerators. The Black Legion sprang their trap, barraging the Loyalists from strategic positions across the city, cutting off any chance of retreat. Despite their unyielding courage, both Space Marine chapters fell that day. Their warriors were savagely mutilated by the demonic host, their precious gene seed forever lost to the Imperium. Meanwhile, as the Imperium battled Abaddon's forces, the Flawless Host, a warband led by possessed Chaos Space Marines, wreaked havoc on the agri-worlds of Galvan II and Galvan IV. They crashed through undermanned Imperial defenses, butchered the city populaces, and looted sacred temples and shrines, obtaining potent artifacts for Abaddon. Leaving nothing but ruin in their wake, they annihilated the planet's shipyards and primary factories before departing, dealing a crippling blow to the Imperium in its hour of darkness. The Fifth Black Crusade was not just a victory for the forces of chaos, but it also allowed Abaddon to destabilize the psychic equilibrium in the region. Each act of violation fractured the warp seals that had kept psychic mutation at bay in that part of the galaxy, sowing the seeds for future chaos. In the tumultuous period of the Sixth Black Crusade, a storm of treachery and conflict brewed, helmed by the ever-cunning Abaddon the Despoiler. Abaddon's focus was trained on Drekarth the Sightless, a fellow leader of a former Sons of Horus warband, and an emerging rival. To neutralize this threat, Abaddon wove a web of deception and alliance with Drekarth and his Sons of the Eye, unifying their forces for a grand assault on the Forge world of Arkrith. The battleground was marked by fierce combat and relentless onslaught as the allied Chaos forces descended upon the world of Arkrith. Against the combined might of Abaddon's Black Legion and Drekarth's Sons of the Eye, the Adeptus Mechanicus defenders faltered, crushed beneath the weight of the Chaos onslaught. Their formidable ziggurats, functioning as intricate flux cages, were relentlessly attacked and reduced to ruins, losing their ability to function effectively in the heat of the battle. With the destruction of the Forge world, the Chaos forces reveled in their victory. However, amidst the triumphant celebration, the true cunning of the Despoiler came to light. Turning his back on his temporary ally, Abaddon betrayed Drekarth, impaling him with his power claw in a swift and ruthless move. The shocking act of treachery sealed Drekarth's fate, silencing his challenge to Abaddon's reign once and for all. Left leaderless in the wake of Drekarth's demise, the Sons of the Eye faced a grim future. However, Abaddon, always the tactician, offered them a path: join the ranks of the Black Legion. Bereft of other options, the Sons of the Eye conceded, swelling the ranks of the Black Legion and further solidifying Abaddon's authority over the united forces of Chaos. During the tumultuous era of the Seventh Black Crusade, also known as the Ghost War, the forces of Chaos unleashed a wave of terror like no other. They erupted from the Eye of Terror, bypassed Cadia, and then, as if swallowed by the shadows themselves, vanished without a trace. This initiated a terrifying game of hide and seek, a time marked by widespread confusion, paranoia, disinformation, and deceit. Far-reaching areas of the Imperium were subject to sudden and unexpected raids. But as abruptly as they had begun, the assault ceased, and the forces of Chaos retreated back into the Eye. Humanity could do nothing but brace itself for the next inevitable onslaught. In the aftermath of a stinging defeat and subsequent retreat suffered by the Blood Angels at Midian, the Carcharodon forces made their move. Descending upon Abaddon's fleet as it sought to rout the beleaguered Blood Angels, the Carcharodon forces unleashed a brutal scourging upon the traitors. This swift and devastating retaliation was meticulously documented on the cemetery world of Hypersitis. During this period of unrest and conflict, a strike cruiser known as the Sanguine Tear fell victim to the forces commanded by the notorious Khan the Betrayer. This marked another unfortunate loss for the forces of the Imperium amidst the ongoing chaos. In an epic clash during the Seventh Black Crusade, the entire Blood Angels chapter engaged in fierce battle on Makkan against a vast Black Legion warband led by none other than Abaddon the Despoiler. Despite mustering their full strength and receiving reinforcement from the Rampages chapter, the aftermath painted a bleak picture. The Blood Angels were on the brink of annihilation, outmaneuvered and overwhelmed by Abaddon and his formidable lieutenants, Telemakan Lyras and Iskondokyan. In a chilling echo of the past, Abaddon slayed Captain Acreon in single combat, mirroring the infamous duel between Horus and Sanguinius. After the Black Legion withdrew from Makkan, a horrifying scene awaited the discoverers. The corpses of the Blood Angels were found desecrated, their precious gene seed corrupted beyond salvation. A single beacon of resistance remained. Reclusiarch Thalastian Duras and his death company had somehow survived the initial carnage. They launched a surprise attack weeks later on Abaddon and his honor guard. Despite their eventual defeat, Duras and the death company inflicted considerable damage, slaying many of the honor guard. As a testament to their tenacity, Abaddon left their corpses untouched, seated upon thrones crafted from the armor of the Chaos Space Marines they had slain. In the aftermath, Abaddon exploited the stolen gene seed to create new Space Marines, enlisting the services of the twisted apothecary, Phobius Bile, to facilitate this dark endeavor. As the Eighth Black Crusade reached its zenith, the terror of the Black Legion spread in all directions from the Eye of Terror. At first, the purpose of their attacks remained inscrutable to the Imperium. The Legion's strikes ranged from annihilating entire settlements to committing smaller-scale massacres that were, nonetheless, monstrous by any standard. On the moons of Tychus, 8 out of the 20 crater cities were brutally exposed to the chilling void, their inhabitants instantly frozen in time, while the rest were left untouched. The Chartist pilgrim vessel named the Divine Path was intercepted on its course. Of its passengers, 999 were ruthlessly executed in the order of their pilgrim tokens. The survivors were left to mourn over the fallen. This period of horrific events was later remembered as the Skullgather. Tens of thousands of lives were taken in the Segmentum Obscurus, the victims meeting their end in a multitude of ways, in precise numbers, their bodies left in patterns of ritualistic significance. This massacre was part of a grand design to win the favor of Tzeentch, the chaos god of change. The numbers and patterns formed a mathematical equation of abhorrent and profane perfection. As Imperial forces chased the Black Legion, seeking to bring them to justice, the Inquisition endeavored to decipher the ritual's meaning. This effort would drive hundreds of their adepts to madness. On the Forge world of Rithkan, the traitors orchestrated a massive rebellion among the mutant workers, throwing the world into tumultuous chaos. Amid the disorder, the Black Legion seized the opportunity to sacrifice the Council of Tecmagi amidst the cogs of their own manufactorums. Their destruction marked the completion of a grand macabre ritual, pleasing Tzeentch immensely. However, all of these terrifying events were merely a smokescreen for Abaddon's true intention. Throughout the Segmentum Obscurus, his forces engaged in meticulously calculated slaughter of Imperial citizens in Tzeentch's name. The constructs beneath the crater cities on the world of Tychus intensified their glow with each ritualistic killing. Upon the 9th sacrifice, the structures began to melt. By the time the Inquisition's agents managed to discern a pattern in the Black Legion's actions, Abaddon had already achieved his ominous objectives. With an ominous plan to cause the downfall of the formidable Imperial Navy fortress of Cancephalus, Abaddon orchestrated what would become known as the Anticanis Massacre. His insidious intention was to divert and draw away the Imperial forces stationed in the vicinity. As the much-needed reinforcements from the Imperial Guard finally arrived at the site of the massacre, they were met with a chilling sight. Abaddon and his minions were already well out of orbit, leaving the planet to its gruesome fate at the hands of cyclonic torpedoes, the signature weapon of Exterminatus, the act of utterly destroying a world. The grim aftermath was an exhausting tug-of-war that spanned over 17 years. The relentless combat and strategic maneuvers gradually depleted the previously unassailable fleets of Cancephalus. This left Abaddon free to wreak havoc on the rest of the sector at his leisure. During this drawn-out conflict, the cost was high. 2 revered Space Marine chapters, the Celestial Swords, were completely wiped out. The Lamenters, another respected chapter, came perilously close to meeting the same fate. Only the timely intervention and aid from the legendary Ultramarines and the noble White Scars saved them from utter annihilation. Meanwhile, in a carefully coordinated distraction, several Chaos fleets managed to quietly emerge from the Eye of Terror. Their destinations remained unknown, spreading an eerie sense of unease throughout the Imperium. With their routes obscured and their intentions hidden, the silent departure of these fleets added another layer of dread to the ongoing conflict. In the cataclysmic 10th Black Crusade, Abaddon orchestrated an unlikely alliance between his own Black Legion and the Iron Warriors, led by their demon Primarch Perturabo. The Despoiler pledged to fulfill an ancient vengeance against the Iron Hands, a pledge that tempted Perturabo to reveal an ancient warp route. This hidden path, calculated and mapped out through agonizing months by tormented machine spirits of chained cogitators, enabled Abaddon's forces to bypass the multi-layered defenses of the Cadian Gate. The fleet then covertly ventured into the Helica sector, located spinward of the Eye of Terror. True to his strategic genius, Abaddon launched a deceptive offensive. He directed the Black Legion fleet against Thracian Primaries, the prominent capital world of Helica, thus drawing attention away from his true target. He dispersed his warlords across the sector, initiating a reign of terror on countless planets. Traitor vessels descended from the skies, their only aim to slaughter and maim innocent Imperial citizens. While his warlords reveled in the massacre of Imperial worlds, Abaddon journeyed alongside the Iron Warriors to the Medusa system, the home world of the Iron Hands. From the bridge of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, he observed as the Iron Warriors initiated a grueling siege against the Loyalist chapter. A war of attrition ensued, the Iron Warriors methodically incinerating the outer worlds of the Medusa system, tearing down the Loyalist defenses one by one. With their fortifications decimated, the Iron Hands found themselves pushed to their limits in their struggle against the traitors. Their resistance bought precious time for their supporting companies to mobilize. However, before the reinforcement of the Iron Hands and their allies could fully engage, Abaddon and the Iron Warriors retreated, leaving in their wake hundreds of dead Loyalist Space Marines. While Medusa still stood, it was a victory of sorts for Abaddon. The Despoiler had gained invaluable insights into both the defenses of the planet and the Iron Hands themselves, knowledge that he would wield as a weapon in future conflicts. With the dawn of the 11th Black Crusade, Abaddon dared to confine a demon of Tzeentch within his ship. His aim was to seek guidance through the turbulent warp storms swirling around the Eye of Terror. Tormented with riddles of impossibility and mazes of lies, the demon descended into madness, driving Abaddon's fleet thousands of light years off their intended path. The demon, consumed by its insanity, tore itself asunder in a vortex of madness, warping the fabric of time and space around the fleet. As a result, Abaddon's ships were dispersed across the vast expanse of the Materium. However, the War Master was undeterred by the failure of his daemonic navigator. The Black Legion descended upon the nearest planet, the cardinal world of Reloria. As they commenced their assault, they found themselves in a three-way war with an unexpected adversary, an Orc War, commanded by Murga, and Red Teeth. In a brutal and chaotic confrontation, demons and orcs locked in battle amid the flaming ruins of Reloria's reflecting towers. The chance encounter with the orcs presented Abaddon an opportunity to conduct a bizarre experiment, attempting to fuse the material and immaterial into a new form of horror. Intrigued by the psychic link between the orcs and their intuitive use of warp energy, the War Master seized thousands of these Xenos, bringing them back to the Eye of Terror for further research. In due course, the Black Legion retreated from Reloria, leaving the beleaguered survivors of humanity to their grim fate at the hands of the orcs. Together with his coven of powerful sorcerers, Abaddon utilized the volatile psychic energies of the Orc Weirdboys in a demonic hybridization ritual, consequently destabilizing the fabric of reality across the entire Relorian system. Simultaneously, as the Black Legion's onslaught persisted, the Death Guard seized the opportunity to launch their own assault on the Subiaco Diaulo sector. They clashed with the Snakebones chapter, under the command of Corthares. The traitors unleashed a horde of plague zombies infected with the devastating Destroyer Plague, eventually corrupting the Snakebones and transforming them into the Plague Bones.
In the upcoming series, we will delve deeper into the events of the 12th and 13th Black Crusades. To ensure you don't miss their release, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Tune in for the unraveling of the mysteries of the Chaos Space Marines' most potent offensives, as we journey through the grimdark tapestry of Warhammer 40,000 lore. Your immersion into the cosmic theater of war is but a click away.